Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, January 10th. The onslaught continues in California, but there is an end in sight. It looks like there'll be kind of a large-scale pattern change in about 10 days or so. It looks like the Pacific Storm Parade that has been pounding California for the past couple of weeks will probably grind to a halt around January 20th or so, and thereafter looks like a drier, milder period for the western part of the United States, the West Coast, and California in particular. At the same time, it looks like it'll become a colder pattern in the eastern half of the nation. California is getting hit hard today with another powerful storm. And look at this latest weather warnings map from covering much of the central part of California. You have everything on the board here, from high surf warning right along coastal sections to wind warnings, flash flood warnings and watches, and in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada in eastern California, avalanche warnings, heavy snow warnings, and the like. We have just a potpourri of weather warnings this morning here across California, and again, they've been getting tremendous rainfall amounts along the low-lying coastal areas. Certainly more than a foot of rain in the last few storms along the coast of California, and incredible amounts of snow in the Sierra Nevada, 5-10 feet at a time here with each of these storms, and the snowpack is already excessive, and still many storms to go through before we get to this quieter period. Again, another 7 to 10 days of an onslaught in California, but again, a large-scale pattern change. Looks like it'll bring about big changes to California and really the rest of the country as well from around January 20th on. Well, here's the latest radar loop from WSI's and telecast.com at weatherunderground.com. California, again, heavy snow in those Sierra Nevada mountains all the way up to places like Mount Shasta in the northern part of California. A lot of rainfall in the lower lying elevation areas all the way down the coast to the San Diego metro region as well. And there's a line of some embedded thunderstorms as well. All of this associated with this latest in a series of Pacific Ocean storms. Certainly numerous power outages with this particular storm system as winds are excessive, rainfall excessive, snowfall excessive. So again, California getting hit very hard. The rest of the U.S., eastern two-thirds of the nation, not all that much activity going on, a little bit around the Great Lakes, the upper part of the Midwest, and some snow across some of the Rocky Mountain states as we begin the day here on Tuesday. Well, let's walk through last night's ensemble run of the European model. By the way, all these maps are from tropicaltidbits.com, and we're looking at the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern here as we move forward. This particular forecast run from 0Z goes out 15 days, 360 hours to the latter stages of the month of January. And again, we've been pounding away here on the onslaught in California and the rest of the West Coast with these upper level lows, just moving in off the Pacific Ocean. Basically, a very powerful jet has been in existence for the past couple of weeks, moving from west to east and slamming California with a lot of moisture coming right off the ocean here. Here's the latest in a series of storms, again, now pounding away at California. Meanwhile, some ridging cutting across the central U.S. and all the way up into the central part of Canada. And notice here what's going on across northern Canada and Alaska, kind of a mixed signal here in terms of some upper level lows, some upper level highs, but you'll notice a pretty substantial pattern change, not only across the U.S., but across Canada as well as we move towards the second half of January. Here we move forward now into tomorrow, and this California storm that is pounding away today slides eastward, and it'll be an interesting weather event coming up along the eastern seaboard Friday into Saturday. This will be kind of an intensifying upper level trough by the time it reaches the East Coast. There'll be an initial storm system that cuts up well inland of I-95 across the eastern Great Lakes, and that will bring some rain to places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, especially late Thursday night into early Friday. Also associated with a cold frontal passage. That front will usher in colder air by the time we get to late Friday night time frame. Then one thing we'll watch for as we get into the early part of the weekend, this trough will see a kind of a second piece of energy, a second vorticity max swinging around from northwest to southeast into the base of the trough. It's going to try to set off the formation of a storm system over the western Atlantic, maybe just off the mid-Atlantic coastline by, let's say, Friday night into Saturday. Chances are slight, but there is a chance that it could develop quickly enough to throw some snow back into the eastern seaboard Friday night and Saturday. It's something we'll monitor over the next couple of days. But here we go into the upcoming weekend. This is the Saturday morning forecast map. Yet another powerful storm system on its way to California during the upcoming weekend. Now let's keep moving forward here. We're all the way out now to the middle of January, January 15th. Still a continuation of upper level low, as indicated here by the blues, into California and the rest of the western part of the U.S. And then now we go farther out in time. We're now a week ahead from today. This is next Tuesday, January 17th. Still a lot of blues showing up here from Alaska down across western Canada and the western part of the U.S. with some ridging, strong ridging over the eastern part of Canada. Now watch what happens as we move just beyond this particular time frame. Here we are now all the way out to the 19th, and here we go, the beginnings of the change, the big large-scale change in the upper level wind flow that I've been talking about here now for a few days. This is a ridge starting to pop up across the west coast of the U.S., west coast of Canada, and this will really stop the flow of Pacific moisture from coming into California. We'll go out a little bit farther in time, and this ridge starts to intensify all the way up into Alaska. Here we are now all the way to Sunday, January 22nd. So we're going out in the second half of the month of January. The strong ridge starting to pop up here along the west coast of the U.S., Canada, and all the way into Alaska. At the same time, upper level trough now starts to develop and intensify in the eastern half of the nation. So this is a large-scale change that will bring about an end to the storm after storm situation in California. Again, we're talking about, let's say, January 20th and beyond, give or take a couple of days. And it also end kind of the mild stretch of weather we've been having in the eastern half of the nation, with a colder pattern setting up at the same time. California starts to dry out. The eastern half of the nation starts to chill down here. Let's go out just a little bit farther in time. And one other thing I'd like to point out here before we move on to another set of maps. We've often talked about, not often, but occasionally we talk about cross-polar flow. And as we get out here into the latter part of the month, notice the flow of air. If in fact the winds tend to follow this kind of a pattern here in the height field, you can see this kind of a cross-polar flow now starting to set up. North Pole right about in this region right here, and we're starting to see more of a cross-polar flow with air coming from the other side of the North Pole to the North American side of the North Pole. At the same time, this high pressure ridge sets up from Alaska down the west coast of Canada and the U.S., and all this will allow for colder air masses to make their way back into the central and eastern part of the nation. Well, let's walk through the 850 millibar temperature anomaly maps from last night's 0Z run of the ensemble version of the GFS. A lot of warmer than normal conditions across the central part of the U.S., central part of Canada, as we begin the day here on Tuesday, January 10th. And we'll see what kind of impact on the temperatures these 500 millibar height changes will have, with that ridge popping up along the western part of the U.S. and Canada into Alaska later this month. First of all, during the upcoming weekend, we have this kind of a cold blast of air following a Thursday night, early Friday frontal passage along the eastern seaboard. Colder conditions will move in for Friday night and Saturday, and we'll have to watch for the possibility, a slight chance, that a second storm forms off the mid-Atlantic coastline Friday night, Saturday. If indeed it can manage to intensify quickly enough, it could throw some snow back into the I-95 corridor region. Still only a slight chance. The initial storm is a certainty. It takes an inland track across the eastern Great Lakes, produces rain on Thursday night in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Meanwhile, California still getting hit with some colder than normal conditions and a powerful storm not only today into tonight, but another one looks like for this upcoming weekend. Now let's kind of go quickly here as we get into the second half of the month of January. Here we are now all the way out to January 19th here, Thursday, January 19th. And this is the time around the 20th or so where the ridging starts to pop up from Alaska down the west coast of Canada and the U.S. And you'll notice here, warmer than normal conditions start to show up across California, Washington, Oregon, all the way up the west coast of Canada into Alaska with that ridge popping up. And notice, colder than normal conditions also at the same time starting to set up in the central U.S. and that expands into the eastern U.S. So by the time we get out 15 days, we have much of the eastern two-thirds of the nation at or below normal temperature-wise. Meanwhile, California, Oregon, Washington, all the way up to Alaska starts to get above normal with that change in the height pattern, with the ridge setting up from Alaska down to the west coast of the U.S. Well, let's wrap up by walking through last night's zero-Z run of the Canadian model. Again, virtually dry across the eastern two-thirds of the nation, but California is getting hit hard with heavy snow in the higher elevations inland and heavy rain and strong gusty winds, numerous power outages, even in the low-lying areas where that heavy rain is falling. Let's move forward here. Tremendous amounts of snow again in Sierra Nevada on the order of 5 to 10 feet, with this latest storm adding on top of an already tremendous snowpack in those mountains of eastern California. Now let's move into the middle of the week. Here we are on Wednesday. That storm system moves into the Rocky Mountains, produces some snowfall there. Then it slides into the Midwest, and there will be again an inland runner cutting across the eastern Great Lakes Thursday into Friday, well west of the I-95 corridor region. That will allow milder conditions to flow back into the Mid-Atlantic region. You can see the isobar pattern right here. The winds flow parallel to these isobars with the low pressure centered out here. Winds blow counterclockwise around lows, so you have a milder pattern setting up here in the eastern third of the nation come later Thursday and Thursday night, and that will be all associated with a cold frontal system, which at this particular time will be situated right about in this region right here as we go into the late Thursday night time frame. That's a strong cold front, colder air flowing in from northwest to southeast behind that frontal system. Now, that front slides to the east coast and off the east coast by the time we get to Friday, and it is at this time that will monitor this particular area right in here, and there is a little bit of a sign of a low pressure area right here. And again, it's only a slight chance, but it's something we'll have to monitor over the next couple of days if indeed a second vorticity maximum swinging down into the base of the trough can set off the development of a storm over the western Atlantic Friday night, Saturday time frame. Again, only a slight chance. It doesn't happen too often, but something we'll have to monitor. Here we are in the middle of the early part of the upcoming weekend, another storm system about to slam into California. Now let's keep moving forward here, and we'll see again another powerful storm into California during the upcoming weekend. And the onslaught does not end there. Here we are now in the early part of next week, all the way into Tuesday, a week from now. Another storm system slides across California and puts some snowfall into the Rocky Mountain states. So onslaught continues in California for the next 7 to 10 days or so, but there is a large-scale pattern change that will be coming to North America around the 20th and thereafter, give or take a couple of days here, and that will produce drier, warmer conditions in California, Oregon, Washington, all the way up across the western part of Canada into Alaska, with a strong ridge developing in that part of North America. Meanwhile, at the same time, later this month, a colder pattern will set up across the central and eastern states. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.